My name is Lena Park. I am 33 years old. And on my wedding day, I walked myself down the aisle. Not because I wanted it that way, but because my father made a different choice at the very last moment. He made it right in front of me, in front of everyone, while the music was already playing. My sister was standing at the entrance with her arm wrapped through his, her chin tilted downward the way she always did when she wanted people to feel sorry for her. My mother grabbed my wrist before I could take a single step forward. Her grip was firm, much firmer than I expected from her. "She just got her heart broken," she whispered into my ear. "Please don't cause a scene right now." So I stood there alone in a doorway wearing my wedding dress, holding a bouquet of white ranunculus that seemed to grow heavier with every second that passed. And then a man appeared from the side of the corridor. I had never seen him before in my life. He extended his arm toward me without speaking a single word, quietly and gently, as if he had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. When my stepfather turned around from the aisle and saw who was standing beside me, every bit of color drained from his face in an instant. The entire ballroom fell silent, and then the music kept playing, and we walked forward together. My name is Lena. This is the story of the man my stepfather spent more than 2 decades trying to make disappear, and what happened the afternoon he walked back into my life without any warning at all. To understand any of this properly, I need to take you back to the beginning and be honest about what kind of family we actually were beneath everything we showed the outside world. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet part of Portland. My stepfather, Raymond, held a job with an impressive title that he dropped into conversations at dinner parties whenever the opportunity arose. My mother coordinated everything in our household, the holidays, the school schedules, the birthday gatherings, with a level of control that left no room for anything she had not planned in advance, including emotions that fell outside her preferred version of our story. Raymond was not my biological father. I have known that my entire life. What I was not permitted to know, what was treated as completely off limits, was anything honest about the man who actually was. The version I was handed was brief and final. My biological father had walked away before I turned 2. He had struggled with alcohol. He had been unstable and unreliable. A court had declared him unfit, and he had surrendered his parental rights without putting up any resistance. Clean, simple, delivered in the kind of flat and certain tone that makes a child understand that further questions are not welcome. I was 5 when my mother married Raymond. I was 7 when he legally adopted me. I have no memory of being asked what I thought about any of it. I remember being instructed to say thank you, so I did. My younger sister arrived when I was 8 years old. She came into the family the way certain children do, like a soft beginning for everyone else. Raymond smiled more often after she was born. My mother's whole face changed around her, and I began to understand, without having the exact words for it yet, that my role in the family operated differently from hers. She was cherished. I was maintained. I do not say that out of bitterness. It took me a long time to land on the right word for it, but that one is accurate. I left for nursing school at 18 and never returned home to live. There was nothing dramatic about it. It simply felt obvious in the way that certain truths do once you have had enough distance from them to see their actual shape. I built a life in Seattle. I became a critical care nurse, the kind that people call steady under pressure. The kind that learned very early how to read the temperature of a room, how to stay composed when multiple things are failing at once, and how to sit beside someone in pain without making it about yourself. The hospital taught me a great deal, but if I am honest, I had learned most of those skills long before I ever walked through its doors. I went home for holidays when the timing worked. I called on birthdays. I kept what my mother described as a close relationship and what I privately thought of as a carefully managed distance. Close enough not to cause friction. Far enough not to get pulled back under. Then I met Caleb. Caleb Reyes was a civil rights attorney who was patient in a way that seemed almost deliberate, curious about nearly everything, and completely unable to leave any situation without first making sure that everyone involved was going to be all right. He made me laugh in a way I had not experienced before. More importantly, he made me feel like I did not have to pretend to be fine all the time. We were together for almost 3 years before he proposed. He did it at home on a Saturday morning in our kitchen with no audience and no performance. Just him and a ring and the particular kind of silence that tells you someone is not going anywhere. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Wedding planning was where the cracks began to show. My mother was enthusiastic about helping. Raymond offered to cover the venue, which felt generous until I realized it meant he expected input on everything from the flowers to the seating chart. My sister assumed she would be a bridesmaid, then a senior bridesmaid, then essentially a co-organizer of the entire event. I gave in more than I should have. I always did when it came to keeping the peace, having spent years calculating exactly what harmony cost and quietly paying it. But I held on to one thing firmly, one single thing. I asked Raymond to walk me down the aisle. He agreed without pausing, without placing any conditions on it. He was in his living room with a drink in his hand when I asked, and he said yes as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. In that moment, he looked like the father I had been trying to convince myself he was for over 30 years. I built the entire ceremony around that, yes. Caleb knew my history better than anyone. He listened the way he always did, without rushing to fix things or filling every silence with reassurance. But in the weeks leading up to the wedding, I would sometimes catch a specific expression on his face when we talked about my family. A careful, controlled stillness, like someone trying to carry a full glass without spilling it. I noticed and asked him about it. He would tell me everything was fine and that he loved me. I let it go each time because I had enough to carry already. I did not know what he was holding back. Here is what I had been told about my biological father, Daniel Cho. His name reached me exactly once, by accident, when I was 10 years old. I was searching a hall closet for tape and came across a plain envelope with a return address I did not recognize, sent to my mother in handwriting that was completely unfamiliar to me. Raymond appeared around the corner and removed it from my hands in one quiet, practiced motion. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at me and said that it was not mine to open. Then he took it somewhere I never located. That night, I asked my mother who Daniel Cho was. She told me he was nobody. She said it the way people say words they do not want to give any power to. At 15, I tried again. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and explained that my biological father had been a troubled person, that a court had examined the full picture and made a decision in my best interest, that Raymond had been my father since I was 7, and that this was what mattered. She was not unkind about it. She was simply closed, the way people become when they have spent years practicing how to stay that way. Here's what actually happened. I learned it in fragments over time, and I will share it the way it came to me. Daniel Cho and my mother met in the early 90s. They were together for 3 years, content in the ordinary and unremarkable way that does not make for dramatic stories, because nothing goes wrong in them. My mother told me later, in the most honest conversation we have ever had, that she loved him without reservation. It is the most open I have ever heard her speak about anything. I was born in 1991. Daniel was present from the beginning, consistently and apparently joyfully. He assembled my crib himself from a kit he bought at a hardware store and spent an entire weekend getting it right. I did not know that until I was 33 years old. They separated when I was not yet 2. Daniel remained involved after the separation. He drove across the city every single week to pick me up without ever missing a visit. He paid child support before any court required it of him. By every available measure, he was trying. Then Raymond entered the picture. My mother was in her late 20s, lonely in ways that a small child cannot address. Raymond was attentive and spoke about the future with a confidence she had not felt in years. She fell in love with him, and I believe that fully. What I can no longer accept is the idea that she understood what he was going to do next. When I was 6 years old, Raymond filed for full legal custody of me. The grounds he presented to the court were that Daniel was an unfit parent. The supporting evidence included statements from 2 witnesses who described him as erratic, dependent on alcohol, and occasionally threatening toward others. Those witnesses were lying. I would not discover that for 25 years. Daniel, who could not afford the attorney Raymond had retained, sat in that courtroom beside an overworked public defender and watched a completely false version of himself being constructed on the record without the means to stop it. He lost custody. He lost visitation rights. Through a subsequent legal proceeding, he lost even his parental status entirely, erased on the basis of testimony that had been manufactured. He was removed from my life officially, completely, and permanently. He told me later that he stood outside the courthouse for a long time after the ruling. He did not know where to drive. He had a truck, a steady job doing finish carpentry work, and a one-bedroom apartment that still had a drawing I had made taped to his refrigerator, held in place by a magnet he had picked up at a gas station because it made me laugh when I was small. He drove home. He kept the drawing. He kept everything. He never stopped trying to reach me. He hired an investigator years later who located an address. A letter was sent. It was taken before it reached me. He wrote for years after that, letters that either arrived somewhere other than my hands or did not arrive at all. He kept copies of all of them in a shoebox. 8 months before my wedding, my mother came to my apartment, sat across from me at my kitchen table, and told me everything. She cried while she did it, not in a dramatic way, but in the steady, quiet way that people cry when they have been holding something so long it has become part of the structure of them. She told me she had discovered the truth about the false witnesses in 2007. Raymond had told her himself, apparently believing it would make her feel more secure rather than less. She had lived with that knowledge for nearly 2 decades. "I am so sorry, Lena," she said. "I know that does not come close to being enough." She was right, it was not enough, but it was the first completely true thing she had ever said to me on this subject, and it altered everything that came after it. I did not tell Caleb immediately. I was still trying to understand what shape this information took, what it meant for everything I had believed about myself. But he noticed I was carrying something new and unfamiliar. He did not push. He simply stayed close to it with me the way he always did. What I did not know, what I would not find out until I was standing in that doorway, was that 6 weeks before the wedding, Caleb had come home from work one afternoon, having already met Daniel Cho. My mother had been in contact with Daniel since the previous autumn. She had told him about the wedding in the spring. She gave him the name of the venue, the date, the time, and asked if he wanted to be there. He said yes without a moment of hesitation. They did not tell me. My mother made that choice deliberately. She said afterward that she was not certain I would allow it, and she was afraid that if I said no, I would spend years regretting it. She said she had watched me protect myself from painful things my entire life, and she understood from her own experience that some protection is simply distance wearing a different name. She was probably right. I probably would have said no, and I probably would have spent a long time wishing I had not. The night before the wedding, Caleb held both my hands and told me that certain things were in motion and that he believed they were going to be all right. He asked me to trust him. I looked at him for a long moment. "That is genuinely the least reassuring thing you have ever said to me," I told him. He almost smiled. "I know," he said. "I am sorry. Just trust me." I said that I would because I did, but I did not sleep particularly well that night. The morning of the wedding, my mother brought me tea without being asked and held my hands a few seconds longer than she needed to when she passed it to me. She looked at me the way someone looks when they are trying to memorize something before it changes. "You look so beautiful," she said. "Mom, something is happening. Tell me what it is." "Nothing," she said. "I love you. That is all." The bridal march began. Raymond was at the entrance. My sister was beside him with her arm looped through his and her chin tilted down the way she always did when she wanted to look like she needed protecting. And then I understood what was happening. My mother stepped close and caught my wrist. "She is going through a breakup," she said quietly. "Please do not make this harder on her." I stood alone in the doorway in my dress, and for a single suspended moment, I was 10 years old again, holding an envelope I had been told was not for me. Then a man stepped forward from the edge of the corridor. He was in his late 50s with silver threaded through his hair at the temples. He was wearing a dark suit that looked like it had been selected carefully and recently. He held out his arm toward me without speaking. No introduction, no explanation, no apology. Simply the offer, steady and calm, as if he had been preparing for this specific moment for a very long time. Something in me recognized him before my mind had time to catch up. I took his arm. When Raymond turned from the aisle and saw who was beside me, every trace of color left his face. The ballroom went completely still. The music continued and we walked forward. I cannot account for every step. I remember the weight of the flowers in my other hand. I remember the sound of the room around us. I remember seeing Caleb at the end of the aisle and watching his face do something quiet and complicated and full of feeling when he saw us coming toward him. I remember reaching the front and Daniel leaning close to me and saying very softly that he had been trying to get here for a very long time. I could not find any words, so I held his arm a little tighter and we stood there together. Raymond left before the reception finished. He did not say goodbye to me on his way out. He said something to my mother as he was leaving that she has not shared with me and that I have not asked her about. Some things can wait their turn. My mother sat with Daniel at a corner table for well over an hour. I watched them from across the room without approaching. I do not know what passed between them, but at one point she placed her hand flat on the table and he covered it with his without hesitation. Caleb found me standing there watching them. He put his arm around my shoulders and told me he was sorry for keeping it from me, that he had not wanted to take the choice away from me, but also had not known how to ask me something that large while everything else was already in motion. I leaned into him. "You knew before I did," I said. He nodded. "Your mother called me," he told me. "She needed someone to help make sure he got through the door. She was not sure she could manage it by herself." I looked at him for a moment. "You're a very unusual and very good person," I said. He kissed my temple. "You looked beautiful walking down that aisle," he told me. "I had good company," I said. "Daniel and I have met 5 times since the wedding. We have coffee. We talk slowly and carefully. We are 2 people who missed nearly 3 decades and are working out what that means with honesty, even when it is not easy." He still has the drawing. He brought it to our second meeting in a protective plastic sleeve and placed it on the table between us without saying anything at all. It was a house with a yellow sun in the upper corner and 2 stick figures standing in front of it, one small and one tall. Underneath the tall figure, in the unsteady handwriting of a 4-year-old, were 2 words: "My dad." I am not telling this story because it resolved itself neatly or arrived with a tidy ending attached. I am telling it because I spent 33 years living inside a story that someone else wrote for me without my knowledge or permission. And on the day I finally let someone step forward and offer me something real, even without warning, even in a doorway with no time to prepare, it fundamentally changed what I understood to be possible. I walked down the aisle with my father, later than either of us deserved, but not too late. That is the thing about truth. It does not always show up when you need it most. But when it finally does appear, it does not wait for an invitation. It simply steps forward, extends its arm, and waits for you to hold on.